You're on the
I'm
air.
sorry. I thought you were Hi, everybody. Welcome to Astrology Unplugged for the YouTubers. For everybody that joins us live, welcome. We are on episode 358. Can you believe that? And today, Rick Cempie and I are going to take you through it's going to be a really conversational evening. Things that we kind of all think about and we all experience when we're looking at a chart. And what we want to do is kind of hit certain questions and start some conversations around chart reading, whether it be your own or somebody else's. And so we have people here that are very familiar with a chart, very familiar with their own chart, very familiar with reading other people's charts. And then we may have folks that are really just, they kind of just know their, three basics here and there, but we'd like to have a kind of holistic conversation on how do you approach it. So thanks, Rick, for making me the host. So we thought we'd open it up with that question. The question being, where do you begin when looking at a chart? And I guess I'll probably pose the question to Rick Cempie, and he can get us started on. Now, Rick knows a lot now, so we can.
You're gonna have people coming requesting to get out of the waiting room, so that'll be up to you.
Okay,
You're on the air live. Go ahead.
all righty. So then I'll pose the question, and then please, this is an open forum. If something comes up that you're confused, you want to go over it, you don't understand, this would be the time, because we kind of want to take you through literally just looking at it from the very start. Rick does it one way, I do it another way. Erica may look at it differently. And there are things that we're going to learn from each other that we may not have thought of. So I think that's where we'll start. Where are you curiously drawn to, Rick? When you look at a chart, and I have yours up, we could bring it up if you'd like. We don't need to, but I organically, where does your eye go? In fact, I think I would do that. You're okay if I bring up your chart?
Yeah, go ahead. Feel free.
Okay.
So my first thought always is, what are the aspect lines just showing us immediately are big, bold, and powerful. And then after that, my curiosity goes to, okay, what's different, what's missing, what's unique about this? If you have this opposition between two planets, what's making this particular chart different than others?
Okay, so can I stop you for a minute?
Sure.
So that's the first thing. You look at the aspect lines.
Right.
Okay. Okay. So like I draw mine actually on my solar file. I make them really thick on purpose because I want to draw attention to the squares in particular. The trines are the blue lines, but I see, so, for everybody listening, it would be the thick lines, which are such a point of maybe tension, maybe where adjustments need to be made.
Catalysts.
Yeah,
I like that word.
totally. I love that word because a lot of people see squares and they go, oh my God, they get scared, or they think that they have such a bad chart, which there's no such thing. I mean,
Right.
it's you get the chart very purposefully
I
for,
like thinking of it in terms of its energy, its
yeah,
focus.
right.
Those things are less scary
Yes.
if we
Yes.
can bring people to see that.
So you look at the aspects first,
Right.
and then what comes to mind after that?
Um, what's So I've talked about this with a variety of astrologers. I love to look at the sextiles because they frequently give you this side view, and they represent experience that you've stepped your toe in the water, you've gotten experience with it, you're somewhere approaching proficiency, but at the same time, it won't be long with if you develop it and you work at it. So I have that Neptune that shows, well, there's a trine, but there's also a sextile. So what is it that I'm trying to develop is what I look at. So how can I be developing that? Because it's really too easy to get yourself distracted and overwhelmed if you find yourself doing the same thing time after time to solve a problem because you're bent in a certain way, and that's the stronger energy in your chart. If you go constantly to what I've always done, you'll get what you've always got. And we see that in a lot of places.
That's a really good point, because we talked about this briefly, where I tend to go straight for the squares and the challenging aspects. That's where my eye goes. Where is this person going to struggle, or where are they going to have to stretch themselves? But the sextiles are so, they can be so meaningful if you know how to use them, or if you're aware of them.
Right.
Which is really good. You have one with your sun and your Mercury and Pluto. That's that's great. That's that can be a lot of a good use of power.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's too easy to become lazy if you fixate on the trines.
Oh yeah. Oh
That's
yeah.
pretty accepted understanding in astrology. The grand trine is made more interesting when you turn it into a kite with an opposition, because that little bit of friction gets you to step off of it gets you out into the mix so that you're not resting on your laurels.
And people can rely on them
Right.
quite for
Right.
sure. I used to heavily rely on mine, and
I haven't looked at the Eris Sun Saturn Sun Moon Grand Trine because it's only in the last year that I've paid attention to it, but I don't recall. I guess the North Node would be the catalyst, but it's not a physical body. But that looks like the major thing that could potentially create a kite from that Sun Moon Eris. So, oh boy, that leads us into something else we thought about talking about. Where does the nodal axis come into play in so many of our charts? For me, Gemini is about elementary communications, understandings, techniques, processes. So, with all the large, heady ideas I have, I need to rein it in and keep it simple.
yeah,
That's a challenge for me.
that's something that I think we should come back to, if you don't mind. But I think that is, I'm a big, and Rick D knows this, I tend to be I focus on the nodes a lot, because it's to me, when I look at mine and when I see it in other people's charts, I do see it working.
Sure.
Usually, I see it working when it's not working. In other words, when they really are still very much in their relying on their south node. So maybe we should take a step back, And just,
I'll let you know, Susan asked a question to throw out there for everyone that certainly makes a lot of sense as well, because everybody is going to eventually think the same thing. What specifically would the moon opposite the North Node suggest? It was something to that effect. Susan,
yeah,
you're more than welcome to go ahead and unmute Erica as well. We're just having open
we
conversation.
really are just chatting it up.
So I tuned in just a couple minutes late. My apologies, but I gather we are talking about most significant aspects.
So,
Ideally, our focus when you pull back is, how do we approach a chart? What are our individual styles? What are
Okay.
first things that we'll look at? And then from there, where's your eye drawn? And then what are you curious about?
So the ruler of the chart might be significant, right? I mean, did you already go over things like that?
I didn't hear what you said. Sorry.
The ruler of the chart
mhm.
might be
We didn't touch on that because we were looking at visually what comes out and jumps.
So we started off with me posing that question to Rick, where does he start? And then absolutely, we want to hear from all of you. Where do you begin? Whether it's your chart or somebody else's chart, your daughter's chart, whoever. What are the things that you are immediately drawn to?
Yeah, my perspective, Rick's habit are not to suggest that one is right or wrong, because so many have validity.
Yeah,
So
they all do. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's just kind of adding layers. But yes, Susan, to your point, the chart ruler it's really a big one. And I've the last few years, I've been really, really looking at it very much in the beginning. I mean, at the very beginning. We started the conversation that way, and then Rick was telling us how he looks at his nodal aspect, and we'll come back to that. His nodal placement, we'll come back to that, because we haven't really talked a lot about the nodes on Unplugged. And we can chat about them later and see where you guys are at with the nodes. So you were saying, what does the moon opposing the nodes mean? Where is your...
in Rick's chart, it looked like his moon opposed his North Node.
Oh,
correct.
I see. I thought it was yours. Got it.
No.
Yeah, she was going from the chart that was visible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Automatically, it puts to mind, whether it's shown or not, that means the moon is conjoined the South Node.
Mhm.
But would it, I
Mm.
mean, my knowledge of astrology is still probably rudimentary at this point,
Sure.
but my gut reaction to moon opposite North Node, and I could be way off base, would be that what you want, what you emotionally are drawn to, might not be in your best interest for your life's path.
Could be. It depends. There's a variety of things that each planet will reflect, and I think that it's important for individuals to recognize, to experience how the person who's living with the chart experiences it. Melanie Reinhart gives some interesting input on that, in regard to someone perhaps embodying an aspect that looks out of that it's wide, or even just a little bit beyond.
So
Maybe there's 12 degrees between that planet, the two planets, and it's looking like a conjunction the way it manifests in their life. That's where you tend to defer. How does it reflect? The moon's also about habit patterns
Oh.
because our emotions lead us to habits.
The unconscious.
Yes. So there's a much easier unconscious pattern for me to step into a formally well experienced road to roll with because
And then and then your moon is in the 5th. Is that right?
it's actually a fourth house moon.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah. The opposition is different
Mark.
is through different houses, I believe you'll see.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. It's at the end of the 4th house.
Yeah.
That could also um give a very, very intuitive, I mean, we see that from other placements in your chart,
Right.
but I think fire signs are very, very tuned into their gut. Whether they kind of give into it or not is a different story, but they have the capacity to just kind of follow their instinct, follow their intuition. And I think with the moon and the south node together, that's a very intuitive placement. Interestingly, Rick and I have opposing nodes. So mine is my south node is in Gemini, and his is in his
Sag.
fourth node is right. So it's a reverse nodal placement that we have, which is really kind of nice. I think, and I will use the word nice because I think organically I learn from him, he learns from me. It's just one of those things where you don't have to kind of, it just naturally falls into place where, yes, all things being equal with other things in the chart, it's like we can learn from one another because of that opposition. And so we talked about first seeing the aspect patterns here, like you have these squares in the trines, you looked at the nodes, anything else that you usually, I mean, with just that's a lot already, because once you start to dig into the aspects, Jupiter squaring Chiron, that kind of thing, that's already, you could spend an hour just talking about that.
Right. I'll also bring attention to the fact that Susan I identified the unconscious. And it's interesting that the moon has rulership over the 12th house, which is also connected to the unconscious. So that for me, as somebody who delves into past life work, that really resonates quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I bet it does. So I would imagine, I would ask you if I didn't know you, I would say, do you tend to get meaningful dreams?
What kind of dreams?
Meaningful dreams, like at
Oh
night.
shoot, there was an interference when you said that.
Dreams at night? Do you dream?
Oh, I have very incredible dreams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
Very
sure.
powerful.
Yeah. So let me.
Can I ask about the significance of Sun and Ascendant both being Leo, but the Sun is actually technically in the 12th house, ruled by the Moon. So it's like you would expect Leo to be like on stage, and yet with all that lunar influence there, does that make Rick tend to be behind the scenes a lot?
Definitely. Absolutely. Using the Leonine management, I speak life into an organization and bring out the qualities of people and put them into place to showcase them more as a director as opposed to the lead actor.
Right, right. So you notice too, and maybe it's because knowing Rick the way I do, Rick is really a natural with looking underneath what's going on in that person's subconscious, what's going on in that person's with their shadow work, what's going on with the stuff they're not able to see about themselves so clearly. He just kind of has a knack for it. So the sun in the 12th house, it's confused. It's not confusing, but it's like, an oxymoron. But for him, and then with other placement in his charts, which is telling us this is a person that is really, to me, if I didn't know him, I would say this person has a capacity for a lot of healing work.
But also the fact that Venus is in the second house and conjunct both Uranus and Pluto. Pluto kind of is got the flavor of that 12th house and exploration and deep dives as well. And Uranus, of course, reflects certainly an interest in astrology.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And he often, I find that he is really one who really truly helps people find their center, their worth, their own power. That's so indicative of, and in Virgo, I think it's just Virgo is such a service-oriented sign, that they really want to do, they want to do good. They want to do good work. and they do. They're actually most of the time they really, really do. They mean well. So you
So
break.
Susan, do you want to go ahead and take a look at your chart?
What we hadn't really looked at yours before, so this was interesting.
Oh,
We get to look at Rick's today. Anything else you want to add, Rick, as far as when you do look at start looking at somebody's chart?
Do you start with sun, moon, and ascendant and go from there?
no. I never do that. I
Really?
always look for
That's so
immediate
funny.
tension.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where's the strongest energy?
Yeah.
Because that's what keeps us moving day to day.
Right.
I want to know what's really pushing someone, keeping them rolling.
Yeah.
Because that will inform many other experiences.
Right.
Yeah, Erica.
Go ahead, Erica.
I meet a lot of new people, like total strangers. Can you hear me okay? Because I have these earbuds in and they make things sound weird sometimes. I'll
No,
take
you're
them
good.
out if you can hear me. So I do look at the sun, moon, and the ascendant because I don't know them at all.
Right.
Sure.
And then I look at, whether they have a lot of cardinal energy, mutable energy, or fixed energy. And I look at things like stellium and of course, the hard aspects and stuff like that. But first I really do look at the basics and try to get a feeling for how does that person see themselves, how are they coming across, what is at the heart of their personality, how do they express themselves emotionally, how do other people see them before I go like to any of those other places. I go to those other places if it's someone that I've studied their chart more and someone has asked me about something specific that they want to know or they're worried about or something like that. And then I start digging deeper, but I just right away look at what kind of energy is it in the later degrees or in the early degrees. How might they communicate and interact with other people based on that.
Yes, yes.
And then I get to where you're talking about, but before I get anywhere near there, I go through all this other stuff first.
Yeah. Yeah, I gotta say, that's the first thing I do, and then I go to where Rick says, but I do, for me, the big three, and then the chart ruler, what planet is ruling the chart, and where is it? What aspects is it making? What's it next to? And then of course I do look at the North Node pretty quickly, but I tend to look at the aspects, the squares right after that. So, Rick D, he's extremely fast. Like my head spins and he's like, oh yeah, well, he's got and it takes me a minute. But I'm getting there. But the square and the Saturns, I look at the Saturns big time because it's especially if they're younger. You know, I had an interaction with somebody this week. I didn't know him very well. But I knew his date of birth and I knew his year of birth. I didn't want to ask his time of birth or anything because it wasn't appropriate. But just that told me a lot about this person. And in like 2 or 3 exchanges, I saw so much of his Saturn. I saw so much of his sun was squaring more. I saw all of that. And I thought to myself, again, astrology is everyone should know this because it helped me understand where he was coming from a lot more. If you don't have a time of birth, it's harder, but I'm with you, Erica. I look at those three and the chart, and there is one thing that I do, and Rick C and I started speaking about it this afternoon, which was the rulerships. Like for example, so right now Pluto's in Aquarius. It's at 0 degrees. So we know it just got there relatively recently. It was at 29 Cap, and it was opposing my Mercury at 29 Cancer. So this is a really good example of, I kind of put it together as we were going through this transit, and we're still in it. I'm still in it. So what does Mercury rule in my Mercury is being influenced, is being aspected by Pluto. Pluto is coming along and having this conversation with my Mercury in Cancer. It wants me to think and speak deep and think bigger. Not like my Cancerian way of speaking and thinking and communicating with people. It's asking something else of me. But I also
the Pluto is a totally different headspace than the Mercury that has rulership over Gemini and Virgo, because that's very casual, very broad, elementary, more precise. But when you go ahead and throw Pluto in the mix to Mercury, all of a sudden everything got deep.
Yeah. I started reading stuff I normally, getting interested in things, getting interested in like murder shows. I normally don't, look at. It is really interesting. You can take it very deeply or very practically on a day-to-day basis. But here's the thing. This is where I was getting to. So what does Mercury rule in my chart? In my chart, it rules the 2nd house and the 5th house. So I'm feeling that. I'm feeling that influence over how I make money, my self-worth, the value that I have in my being, and how I also, my relationship with my children themselves, my creativity. And it's been really interesting because I'm still very much in it. In fact, the fact that I'm talking to you right now, this is something that I think, is part of that transit. It's not, Mercury in Cancer is really nurturing. It can be very wishy-washy, too emotional. There's wonderful things about that, Mercury in Cancer. But now I'm ready to move beyond it. Am I making sense? So rulership, that's really the point I was trying to make after I took you that long road. So what planets are ruling a certain house that, whether by transit or in your natal chart, that I look at, especially lately. I didn't used to. Rick, do you do that?
Look at,
The rulerships?
yeah, oh, because of my fascination with dispositors.
Mm-hmm.
I am always fascinated by people who have a final dispositor or a pattern that creates a mutual reception dispositor where you
Yeah.
have just two planets everything's going back to. So it's this interesting feedback loop. And if those happen to be in aspect to one another, woohoo, all kinds of fun.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So let me ask, if I can just pause for a minute, and I want to make sure that we're kind of all tracking here. Everybody else, when you, either Sigmund or Teresa, Linda, Renate, are you finding that perhaps this conversation can help you look at your chart in a new way? Do you even look at your chart at all?
Not any longer.
Not any longer. Okay.
But transits, I'm on the transits all the time.
Yeah. The
So when you look at the
transits.
transits, are you looking at how they're affecting your chart?
No, it's more the other way around. I'm an experienced one. I, when something happens, even little things that are a little bit out of the normal, I always have a look at the transits and find the correlation. There's always a correlation. And I do the same with my friends who know already. They call me and say, oh, this and this happened. Can you have a look? And does it wear longer or whatever? So I'm working with that, not with my chart any longer. Well, I'm 85 next month, so done, deal. But what I'm very happy that you are talking about the North Nodes now. I always said, I never talk about the nodes. And the first thing, I don't do really big consultations any longer. I did back in Germany and a little bit in Canada. I'm just doing for friends and acquaintance little things now. But I'm always looking the first thing at the notes. And then I look at the rest, how are they acting? And I see most of them are very stuck in the South Node. And I have to say from myself, the moment I read about my notes, I had an aha and said, oh, I understand now, because until then I was living the South Node.
Yeah.
And for me, it helped very much. And so I'm really concentrated on the notes.
May I ask a question, Renate?
Yeah.
Just because of my own learning, when do you think you started to pay attention to your node?
I don't know.
Was it an event of awareness?
No, I learned it by a book.
Okay.
A very, very detailed one about the notes. And when I read that, oh, I understand this. I understand why I didn't want to marry. But I had to. And fall is, oh my God, that's why that. And this is meant to be in this life now.
Yeah.
the opposite. And yeah, and I started right away trying to live it.
Yeah, okay. That's why I asked when. When was that? Was it in your 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s? I don't, when do you
No, I started in my 40s with astrology, so it might have been in my end 40s, yeah.
Okay, okay. And that's actually where, from what I know, is like what I really, most people, unless you're really aware, I believe they start to kind of live and started integrating their South Node in a good way in their 40s. So to me, this is just kind of how I see the nodes. It's not necessarily a place to run away from, but to use it in a good, healthy way, consciously. And naturally, the North Node will start applying. I didn't realize that until, I don't know, last 5 years. Because I've been obsessed with the nodes probably forever. I
Oh.
I just love, I absolutely, I'm in love with them. But
Yeah, me too. It's amazing. And what
yeah,
they say, the South Nodes, what you come, for me, it was a complete revelation, much more than anything else in my horoscope, was the nodes.
I
And
think
I'm,
too in synastry, you see a lot of interesting things with the nodes when you
Oh,
compare your chart to another.
that's what I wanted to say, the opposite, like you, Claudia, and Rick have. I had a lover when I was 42 who was 24 or what, and we had the notes opposite like you. And we went from lovers to friends, and we are still friends now.
wow.
So yeah, and so I found out and some even marriages like that, like some friends of my mother, it was a happy marriage, even about the man was so much younger than the woman.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Very interesting. I don't have your chart, Renate. If you want, I can pull it up, but if you put your
No, I can. My North Node is in the 9th house. In no, the other way around. My North Node is in Scorpio,
uh-huh.
and the South Node is in conjunct with my Sun in the 9th house in Taurus.
Okay. Okay.
That's interesting because if I heard you correctly, your sun has conjoined your south node.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And this idea that the south node is what you find yourself connecting with easily, and you're supposed to be trying to get, it strikes me that that setup is definitely one where you're trying to bring balance into this life.
Yeah. Yeah. I found it interesting. I'm looking up all the horoscopes in the house here. I'm living in that community with for other people. And one of my Scorpio neighbors here, he is 65 now. He is not willing at all to go to his North Node.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely no. I try again and again telling him, no, absolutely not. He lives a hermit and he is way too afraid to come out.
Mm-hmm.
Living his moon, who is Libra moon in 7th house. That is community and well, oh God, my English is always gone when I want to say something. Well, anyhow, I see it that he absolutely doesn't want to go there. He wants to stay hermit, like a hermit,
Right.
because, and he says, I'm comfortable with myself, but not with other people, you know. And his not, I have it now not here, but it's his horoscope is screaming for company and be with others and communicate with others. And
Yeah.
he just doesn't want. And he is 65 already. And
Can you talk about what the North Node and South Node show in our charts?
me?
Yeah.
Anybody, whoever really, I don't have a real understanding of the nodes. So I would
So-
love to know what the impact is of the nodes on the chart.
Yeah. So
Let me bring up-
my
Go ahead. Rick.
Claudia, I go ahead, do you?
No, I was just gonna bring up Susan's chart, so we can,
Oh yeah.
And Linda, you seem to have some thoughts. that
I
you wanted to
was
share.
just going, the teacher in me was saying, we're a little abstract and we need a visual and some definitions. That's all I was going to say, because I'm thinking about the people on YouTube who may not know anything about nodes.
Sure.
okay,
And
okay,
we don't talk about them much in
yes.
this context. So it's a
Right.
very good learning experience, but people need to see. That's all.
Yeah,
Number
Linda,
one,
teacher and me concurs.
great, okay. So we can absolutely talk about this, from what they mean in general to what they mean in
Right.
chart. Before I say that, there's probably tons of books out there, but the best book I've ever read is by Jan Spiller, which I'm sure you probably know, Astrology for the Soul. It will blow your socks off how accurate it is. So she takes you node by node, like, yours is in Gemini. So if your North Node is in Gemini, I've read a lot about the nodes. It's an exceptional book. I highly
Is
recommend.
that the one where is that the one where she even illuminates the prenatal eclipses?
I don't think so.
Okay.
There must,
Might be
I'm sure
another
there-
work of hers.
I'm sure maybe it's another work of hers, but she's actually, I think she's pretty famous for her work with the nodes. So the nodes are not really, they're not planets. They're points
Right.
on the ecliptic. So they're, in fact, when we have eclipses and they're close to the node, the South Node or the North Node, that is what makes an eclipse. Depending on how close they are, sometimes they're really close, sometimes they're a little further out. So they're not a physical point in the sky that you can say, oh, there's Mars. But it's I'll call it metaphorical, but that's not the right word. But you know what I'm saying. So
They're spaces, they're places.
Can you show an example and talk about the meaning of it in the chart?
yep, I'm gonna show you right now. Let me I'll bring up my chart for a minute. But this applies for anything. And what I've learned lately is that the house is incredibly important, and so is the ruler of the node. So for example, mine is in Sagittarius. So Jupiter would be really important to me. Where is my Jupiter? It's in Pisces. So let me just backtrack because I really want to take this slow. So there are points, spaces, right? And it is wherever, remember how Rick talks about, Rick D, there's 12 signs, but really there's 6 pairs. You look at things in pairs, right? There's 6 pairs making 12 signs. So wherever the North Node is, the South Node is automatically opposite that sign. So if your North Node is in Scorpio, your South Node's in Taurus. If your North Node's in Sag, your South Node's in Gemini. That, like that. So, and I don't want to hog this up, Rick, so I know you have a lot to say about this as well. So what we know about the nodes is that they're really points of evolutionary soul development. So
Beautifully put.
Yeah.
Yeah, you come into this life when you were a baby, and you come in as a fresh soul from another realm, and you are still, think about it like this, the South Node is like you're coming out of your past life. So in your past life, in the last past life, you were in your South, you were the South Node Gemini. So for me, it's Gemini, right? So, okay, solar fire, I haven't put my South Node in here because I just kind of know it. But remember, if this is the North Node, it's in Sag. Automatically, we know that it's in the 7th house. That means in the 1st house, it'll be the South Node right here where my cursor is in Gemini. Same thing for everybody else. It's exactly the opposing house. Whether you, like this doesn't show it. It's not showing it on this chart. So when I was in my younger years, just likely like all of you, and most people I know, like Renate was saying, you come in with the habits, the tendencies, the outlook of the South Node patterns. They're
Yeah,
like,
you feel safe there. You feel safe. That's
Right.
where you feel comfortable and safe.
yeah. And
The devil you know.
yes, and the devil you know in this case is something that you've already kind of done, and you need to let go of that way of being if your soul is to
Progress.
grow into self-realization. I'll just say it that way. But you don't want to. It's the last thing you want to do. I find that in your 40s is when you start to kind of want to, or to see. It's like a blind spot. Oh, okay. So in the 1st house in Gemini, guess what I did? I was always lying to myself. Always lying to myself, not seeing, and I would lie to others, because if you lie to yourself, you're lying to other people. I had a very, very an overwhelming amount of mental, a lot of anxiety, a lot of too much mental activity. I was always in my head. So as I grow older, and it's still, it's very much still happening, it's just really just begun. I move into a place of more following my gut, like I talked about before. And this is in the 7th house. So this is important for me because I also have a T-squared to Neptune. So in the 7th house, it's almost like I never really saw my partners clearly. I never saw situations clearly with other people. I always had rosy colored glasses on, not seeing the reality at all. Now I have a different way of looking at that Neptune, but back to North Node. So we all have a place where we know it's kind of like on some level, oh, you know what? I really should, I don't know. Like the guy that Renate, her friend, on some level, he probably knows that it would be good for him to socialize, be with other people, be in community, have a relational, healthy life. I'm not saying get married or anything. I'm just saying just not be such a
Have
low.
interactions with other people.
Yeah. He's resisting it, but on some level, he may know that that's exactly what he needs to do. He's just not, it can be very subconscious until you kind of wake up to it. I've said a lot there, so I'll let Rick speak about it because I'm sure he's got a lot more to add.
So we talk about it being a mathematical point, and the North Node is, in a way, something is being elevated that is ascending to your focus. It's like it's almost like, I like to think of it as I'm fleshing out the words for my nodal understanding. I think of it as like the moon's ascendant in some ways. This is where you're going into a totally new experience. The South Node is your comfort level with the experiences you've always had.
Mhm.
North Node, that's the unknown. And I think that's what scares people. Because you're about to experience something that is, as Renate said, out of your comfort zone. That just feels so good to be in that South Node space. But North Node space, there, and it scares some people, and some people who are adventurous, it won't, you know? So I'm comfortable being honest and looking at it for myself. But other people, like Renate's neighbor, not so much.
So are you talking about the influence of the house that it's in, or the influence of the planets, or the sign, or all of it? I mean, can you show an example specifically and then explain it in those
Let's go
terms?
ahead and pull up Susan's chart since you have it, Claudia.
Yeah,
I'll use hers to explain this.
yeah. It's coming up. Here we go. Okay. All right, so your North Node's in Capricorn. Okay.
So your South Node is very comfortable in the 5th house in Cancer. Ooh, that's all kinds of fun with creativity.
Okay.
Artist. That makes a lot of sense. And you love that part of nurturing the image and fleshing out all the potential that that image has to shine forth its beauty. Because essentially, Cancer is that space of the cosmic mother, right? So it's about creating the hospitable environment and this new creation that's going to have all the potential, like a new baby. North Node, Capricorn in the 11th. So you're really trying to, what your North Node is trying to launch into is, what is the experience for the future? What is it that you can build on? How do you approach? Because if we consider that North Node an unknown space for you, then I suspect you're looking to stretch yourself in Capricorn ways that are going to help you advance your station, make yourself secure in your footing, go into places that are new to you in order to make a better future for yourself. How does that basic description of that North Node work for you?
I don't know, because how does Capricorn tie into trying new things? I thought it would be risk adverse.
North Node.
Right.
The North Node is the part where it's new. So, like you're saying, risk averse. Well, you're going to try new things, but you're going to make it easier. So I'm wondering if the new things, you're making art, beautiful art. And somewhere along the way, you're using it to advance your future.
Oh,
And Susan, you know,
To make a better
said-
world.
yeah, you said something, I think it was last week or the week prior. You said you're you're working in a new way. I forgot, was it that you were doing like spiritual portraits or something? I don't know
Yeah,
what it was. Okay,
basically, yeah.
okay.
Basically, it's readings with, you know, tuning into your loved one in spirit, your spirit guide, or your angels, getting a reading from that,
Mhm.
and a portrait.
So what I felt when you said that was that you were very certain that you were sure of that. You were sure that you were kind of, you must have tried it out at some point, but now you were headed in that direction. It, to me, it was very much like you were leading yourself in this new way at these fairs, at these festivals, at these places where there's a bunch of people. And
Right.
it's in the 11th house.
Okay.
This is very much, you know, like Rick said, for the good of the community,
Humanity.
the people,
Yeah.
Okay.
groups, and you're gonna find that this is a Capricorn is a leader. Capricorn is a leader. It doesn't mean you're gonna open your company and be the CEO, but whatever you are doing, you're your own boss. And it sounds like you are your own boss at this point in your life. But it is, to me, the house. So let's think about this. Let's just take it a step further. What planet rules Capricorn?
Saturn.
Saturn. Saturn is, it's the planet of, of a fixed physical congealing of physical matter. Like you're taking something that is, in here, and you're actualizing it in the physical form.
Right.
And your Saturn conjoined Venus in the ninth
Oh.
in Scorpio totally speaks to me of a blend of form and function, which is very artistic,
Yeah.
focusing on things that are in the areas of the deep, which is the other side, and our mortality, which is guides, angels, deceased loved ones,
Right.
in the house of spirituality. So you're connecting it through your own spiritual practice, and you're also sharing it for the sake of others' spiritual practice.
Okay. I understand that.
And
Yeah.
you came in with this gift of artistry. You came in with an artistic, creative, natural
Good.
ability. Your South Node, by the way, you're going to be good at that place. You're going to be very good at it. But you're going to use it. This is why I think some people get it it's a little bit misguided to say you need to let go of it. No, you're going to use it for the betterment of the North Node naturally. So the South, it's not like, oh, get rid of it. It doesn't exist. It's like the ego. Well, we can't ever really get rid of our ego. We are humans, and we can try, and we do, and evolved beings. But that's a different conversation. But you came in with something that it is a natural ability of yours, and you're going to use it. And it all happens organically. Nobody says, okay, well, now you're going to do A, B, C. It kind of just happens. It comes over you, like Rick D talks about. It just kind of, it just comes over you. So you didn't plan on, maybe you did plan it, but usually it's just, I think it's just your soul naturally growing into the wholeness it already is. But now it's on this physical earth expressing itself in this way.
I think too, it's interesting that Sagittarius is on that 11th house cusp as well as the 10th, because Sagittarius on the house cusp shows where we came in to expand our awareness. How do you professionally interact with large groups to make an impact for the future, not just for yourself?
Huh.
Your spiritual art is a wonderful manifestation of that.
Okay.
Now, when we talk rulership, there's the rulership by sign, but also by house. The natural ruler of the 11th house, we look at Uranus. Uranus comes into play in your chart with that T-square that goes to Neptune. Neptune is highly artistic, very otherworldly and ethereal.
Right.
It shows with that Chiron connection in the T-square that you are allowing, with an 8th house Neptune, these boundaries that have been dissolved, that you get to perceive information from other planes. You're also connecting with the individual that you're working with, as well as the spirits that are coming through to inspire the art. So it definitely has an interrelationship. And I would not be surprised if there was something with the parental relationship, because oftentimes the nodal axis, when coming into space with a large body that is rather heavy, and I'm thinking that you have that Eris that's in T-square to the nodes, that may have impacted your upbringing and the way you experienced family dynamic that could have created some type of fair play, justice. Something needs to come to look at that, somehow that has to come into play.
Interesting. Neat. Thank you.
Does that does that make sense for everybody else? Not necessarily Susan's chart, but how you viewed your node in your own chart and what it's trying to do in your life. Don't all speak at once, please. That's too much.
And
So I guess that on our charts, we only have the north node, but the south node is always opposite.
Always.
Yes.
So you said, Teresa, what does the north node and the 5th mean?
Yeah.
Okay, so you have the opposite of Susan, so your north node, I'll bring up your chart. Your north node is in the 5th. That means your south node is going to be in the 11th. Just give me 1 second.
And it's opposite almost Pluto, whatever that means.
Wow. Power.
Renate, while that chart's coming up, what are your thoughts about Pluto in the mix with the nodes?
Well, my experience with people I know who have that, they are mostly in power struggles. They don't really want to use their power. So they get a lot into the influence of the power of other persons. And maybe they bring it from a former life, that they are hesitant to live their power fully. But that's my experience. And funny, I know quite a lot of people who have the Pluto North Node or South Node thing. And they are all very controlling, because they are afraid of something. It's always, well, something could happen. I have to control every situation. So that is my experience with it.
Yeah, you got it, Renate.
Yeah.
So it's actually in the 4th house. And
Right.
in the 10th.
Oh,
So
Yeah,
it's-
right. So I gotta move this. Oh my gosh, I can't move this. Just disregard that. Pretend it's not there. Close your eyes. It is in the fourth house. According to some, you may have a chart that puts it in the fifth house, Teresa. I'm not sure, but we can't really see that. But according to Solar Fire, which I would probably rely on more, it's at the end of the fourth. And it's pretty closely opposing Pluto. So that puts the South Node here in Leo. And it's like, to me, that would make me question how you have allowed yourself to, if you've allowed yourself to be dominated, or if you have been doing the dominating, say 20 years ago. Remember, I think, it's just my opinion, the younger you are, the more we're going to see your South Node habits. So in your 30s, in your 20s, in your 40s, you were probably living more in your South Node than you are today. As your consciousness expands, I think that changes. That's just my opinion. But if you've allowed yourself to either to misuse your power, or where you felt like, let's take the shadow side of Leo. You could put the shadow side of Leo in there. So Leo can be too much in the ego. Leo can be, you know what they say about those Leos.
It can also give a sense of confidence in managing your professional life, where you want to retreat into work to have that North Node. It's easy to go ahead and retreat into work because that's something you've been doing through different lives. What's trickier is to go ahead and look at your own identity and what is it that you want. Aquarius can be sometimes so much in their head, they're not skilled at experiencing the feeling of receiving the love that is shown to them. So there could very well be, in this North Node in Aquarius fourth house, a direction for you to find greater fulfillment as you learn to receive the love that other people are giving.
That sounds right.
And maybe at one point, and you have to be really honest with yourself here, could you have been too identified with what other people thought of you in your
Oh, yeah,
in your earlier years?
Yeah,
yeah,
10th
of course.
house. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now you'll probably find that, as Liza says, or has mentioned in past conversations, enlightened self-interest. So you have an awareness now at this point in your life that we are here for each other. We are here for helping one another evolve and accept and love. I mean, I see it in you when I've heard you speak, that it's a real acceptance of, yeah, we may all be different and may look different and may be from different places, but really we're one. And that's very, very, it is the enlightened Aquarius energy. Usually, not always, the North Node is going to express itself in those good, I hate to use words like good, bad, but usually in the positive way. So your north node, as you grow into it, you're not gonna express the negative sides of Aquarius. Whereas in your south node, you would have expressed the shadow side of a Leo, for example. Does that make sense?
What's the shadow side of Leo?
Like I was saying, identified with,
The unconscious part.
yeah, the unconscious part, meaning that part of Leo in this case that would be too much in their ego, identified with I matter more. Oh,
Okay.
look at me,
May-
look at how much I do.
May I say something?
Yeah.
You might
please.
have had a powerful position in a former life and might have misused a little bit your power there.
And it's something that you may have seen in your life play out in that way, or you may have seen it play out in a smaller version of it, but you would have felt it at this point. And knowing you the way I know you here, it feels like you have more of a real care, a real appreciation of humanity and people. And, take the natural ruler of the fourth house. That's Cancer. So it's the opposite of take the mother archetype, which is a Cancer. A mother cares for, if she has 10 kids, she's gonna care about each one. She's gonna know what each one needs. And you strike me as a kind of person that is more and more aware of that. But even in a bigger scale, as far as this is the collective, this is Aquarius is all of us. I mean, the people in Korea, the people here. It doesn't, we're the same. I hope that was somewhat helpful. Hey,
Yeah, thank you.
we have Sean that joined us, and we have Jane. Hi, Jane. Hi, Sean.
How are you guys doing?
Hi, you guys. Hi, Sean.
Rick D took the night off, and he's letting us play for a little while.
Nice, nice. I'm enjoying the games and the fun times listening in.
So the number I wanted to just, does anybody else have anything they want to talk about regarding the nodes? So we kind of, are you more familiar with what they mean in your chart, in your life, in your chart, and then what it's really trying to do, what it's really trying to help, it's trying to help you. Let's face it, all the planets in our charts are trying to help us. They're here to help us. We don't see it that way because we're like, oh my God, I got Saturn in the 8th house, and it's, like, but they're here to help us. And it is up to us to, to realize what it's trying to do in our lives, and to kind of, sometimes you do need a shakeup. You do. And this is another thing I was going to mention before. When I look at a chart, because for Sean and Jane, the topic tonight was, what do you begin looking at when you're looking at a chart? Where are you drawn to naturally? So we went over where we instinctually go. But I also wanted to say, if I'm looking at a chart, and this probably goes without saying, I will see what's affecting this person today, because this person is talking to me usually because stuff is not right, not because things are going well. They're talking to me because the beep hit the fan. So that's the next thing, is transits. And I have a piece of paper that I probably carry with me everywhere. I don't really carry it with me everywhere, but I remember it. It's a list of all of this year's eclipses. Because if you have, okay, so we have a 5-degree Taurus eclipse coming up. That is
Oh.
not going to affect everybody. That is not going to affect, I mean, yes, it's going to fall somewhere in a house in your chart, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be the life changer for you. The math has to math, So you have to have something close to 5 degrees of a fixed sign. So that's the next thing I look at, and we could probably talk about it. We'll talk about eclipses another time.
Oh.
But that's another thing that I look at immediately. And of course, Pluto transits, because, it's Pluto. It's the one that I look at. But, the outer planets, Neptune, Uranus, what are they doing in your chart right now?
And
Linda
Saturn, of course.
and Saturn.
Yeah.
How do you normally begin?
Linda,
Me.
to you.
Okay. Well, I look at the angles first. I mean,
Mm.
I think I look at a chart and I say to myself, okay, like I'm looking at what's on the angles, what's on these sort of power positions. And then I look to see, how much is below the line and how much is above, how much of this is, sort of in the
And-
world and how much of it's inside the person.
Interior, yeah.
And then I look for groups of planets. And some of that I think has to do with my own chart, because I have that big cluster of stuff in Libra. And so, sort of interpreting that, and then looking to see, what the sort of pattern that the planets make. I have a bucket pattern, so I look for that. But, some people have a kite, and some people have like
Yes.
a distribution all the way around the zodiac, a couple of planets here or there. And that kind of gives me a sort of a flavor of sort of what the balance of the chart is, where
Right.
there may be interesting spots, and sometimes things just jump out. I mean, I have the moon in the first, the moon is Scorpio in the first house. And so that moon just sits there and you just look at it and you say, oh, okay. you cannot not notice that. And I have Mars and Venus at the top of the chart, one on one side, one in the 9th house and one in the 10th house, but they're right close together. And so those kind of things, I'm a bucket pattern to Jupiter. So I sort of, because I've looked at my own chart so much, I know that those things are places I can go to start making some meaning about it. Now,
Yeah.
this whole business about the nodes is very interesting to me, because I did not know anything about them. I mean,
Okay.
that would be nothing other than there's that little symbol on the chart that we never really talk about, or I've never really looked at very much.
Yeah.
And I think that's another very helpful thing for if I had a chart where I didn't see a way in, that would be an easy way in a way to look at, what's the energy of their lifetime moving from and towards. So I think that was a very interesting discussion. So thank you for being helpful.
Yeah. I
I
remember.
like your balance that you look at the card, the angles. and
Yes.
In addition to going top half, bottom half, I always look east and west.
Mm-hmm.
See, is it more a person, self-oriented in focus, or is it others oriented in focus?
Right.
That's
Yeah.
another hemisphere issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the whole exquisiteness of the zodiac, so to speak, is I mean, and then you can start to look at, or is it fire signs or water signs or air signs? And there's just so many things you can look at.
Yeah, no, it's a lot and it can be a little overwhelming. That's why I have people ask me about a yacht in their chart or something else, but they don't even know about the basics. So it's really, and there's Saturn and other things that I think will help them that are probably even more, not necessarily more, but they can really, it's a good way in to learning and to their chart. Because there's people that really just they want to hear about their chart, and there's people that want to learn. Some people want to make it a profession. Some people want to just do it because it's interesting. Whatever you do with it is up to you. But in other words, I'm not gonna have somebody parallel park if they've never gotten behind the wheel. Just, first you got to turn the car on and then you got to go and so planets and houses and signs. The fact that I learned on this show so much, and I learned so much from Rick, but like Linda just said, and I think you might have alluded to it, the angles. Oh my gosh, the angles. I mean, they're just
Good
so
basic.
critical, so important to look at. And if you have anything on the angles, or if you have anything that's transiting one of your angles or squaring one of the angles. So they're little things, but adding them up, it really gives you a really big flavor of what you could be experiencing at the moment, or maybe what's ahead, what's possibly ahead in a couple of years or in a couple of months. That's why I love astrology. It's one of the reasons I love astrology, because if you know that your Saturn is going to conjunct, if you know that Saturn in the sky is going to go over your moon, and you know it, don't you think it kind of puts it in perspective? So when it gets to that point, it's not as jolting to me. Maybe it's just me, but it's not as maybe disorienting. I don't know the right word to use, but I also know what, in that case, what would Saturn be trying to do with my moon? What is it trying to do with my moon? How can I use this to the best of my ability? Not like it's, oh, I gotta do this, but there must be a reason why I'm having this transit. It's kind of like solar returns. Some solar returns are rough. Well, there must be a reason why you need that one. And then other times they're not, they're better.
But I found out when somebody has the same aspect in the birth chart, it is different. For instance, when you said Saturn moon, I have a Saturn moon square. So when Saturn squared my moon, I didn't feel it that much because I know that already.
You live with it.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's true. I remember it was a couple of years ago. Saturn was opposing my sun, and Rick was like, you're not used to this Saturn business, because he lives with Saturn energy. And it's a good point, Renate, because it's true. I just was like, oh, woe is me. And he kind of put it in perspective, which is true, makes perfect sense. Fire signs sometimes don't enjoy having to feel Saturnian energy. But it certainly served its purpose. But if you live with it, it's a little, it's different. It's not as hard, maybe.
No, right. I
Yeah.
have a Saturn bucket handle. I don't find I mean, yeah, there's always going to be lessons, but you accept it as a part of life.
Right. I
Yeah.
think that's exactly right. So I came to a point in that transit that I just accepted it, accepted what it was trying to show me or do for me. I just recently had Saturn over my moon. I had to accept that, maybe I'd be a little bit down sometimes.
So, we're getting real close to the end of the show. Sigmund, you haven't said much for as long as you've been here. Do you have an observation you'd like to share?
Well,
Yes.
I don't do charts. It's just there's so much. It's too much for me.
Mhm.
And only having a limited amount of time on Earth. I mean, you can't turn towards something where you turn away from something else. So I have other pursuits. One of the things that this show has motivated me towards is to check out my chart and see where the North chart is and what what I'm going towards, what I've been living through as far as the aspects go, and my South, where I've come from, what I've been comfortable with. See what the chart has to say. So that's real interesting. I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, I think it really highlights that element that Claudia was speaking about, that Rick brings our attention to, that everything is in pairs of opposites. And that's where a lot of shadow work comes from. We mentioned a little bit of that earlier, and trying to find that motivation of an underlying current that fuels the outward expression. That's kind of where you look at those things. Fascinating stuff.
Yeah. And that's a really good way to put it. That underlying current. I always find that a lot of these things in our chart or a transit, it's not something that you can say, that you can like write it down on paper, but there's some part of you that's stirring, that's feeling something, that may have dreams about it, that these thoughts come into your head. And eventually it may express itself more obviously, but it's an undercurrent, and it's there. And sometimes you have to look at it because it's just kind of hits you over the head. Anybody else have anything they may want to add?
Jane,
comment.
Sean, feel free to throw something in if you have any thoughts.
As I said, I'm still got the big learning curve happening. It's just fascinating. I'm sorry I was late, but I must have got the times wrong again. Have you had daylight saving?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So but honestly, it's just, I'm still learning. I'm learning with Ksenia more, and
Yes.
slowly but surely doing it. And in a bit like what Sigmund just said, I haven't actually had the focus on it a lot lately, other than this beautiful group. So I'm going to get stuck in again when I've got less happening else in my life, and just really understand houses and all of that more. So I'm looking forward to then being part of this group, and
of course,
just getting
and
it. So thank you. Thank you.
It just kind of seeps in, even if you don't fully understand, it gets in there. And
it really does.
And I love that, because the truth is, you're always living it, but then when you come to a group like this, even if you don't actually understand it, it just, one day it'll come together and you go, oh, that's what they were meant. That's what they meant.
Yes.
Talk about that. Well,
And I
listen,
take so many notes as well, so that helps too when I
Good.
go back home. Thank you,
Well,
thank you.
we had a great evening. Thank you, Rick C, for being my co-pilot.
Absolutely. Had
Always.
a lot of fun.
And I had a lot of fun with you guys. Thank you all. And we will meet back here. I don't know what we'll be doing and who will be doing it, but we'll be back. So everybody have a great night.
Thank you so much.
Oh.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Take care, all.
Thank you, Claudia.
Guys, have a good night.
Bye, everybody.
Many blessings.
Thanks,
to you.
everyone.